major manipulator. He bought the birthright from Esau for the price of a bowl of stew, and he deceived his father to get the birthright, and he did all that kind of stuff. And we've watched him all along. But I told you earlier, this thing's going to come to roost with him. He's going to find out what it is to be used and abused in the way that he deals with Uncle Laban. So, any rate, the theme of this chapter 29 is where Jacob meets Rachel. Jacob serves for Rachel, and Jacob is greatly deceived. Over this chapter, I'd like to write this: be not deceived, God is not mocked. This is Galatians 6, 7, and 8. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. In the beginning of this chapter, we'll see that Jacob begins to reap the harvest of all his manipulations and all of his evil doing. It's an amazing thing how people think they really get away with things. You don't get away with things. So the passage in Galatians is written primarily for Christians, but expresses that universal law that whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And it's true, actually, in every area of life. It's true that if you sow corn, you know what you'll reap? Corn. If you sow cotton, you reap cotton. If you sow wheat, you reap wheat. If you sow tares, which look like wheat, but is a weed, you'll reap tares. And examples of this principle follow all the way through the Bible. Pharaoh slew the male children of the Hebrews, and in time his son was slain by the death angel. Ahab, through false accusations, had Naboth slain, and the dogs licked his blood. God sent his prophet Elijah to Ahab with the message that as the dogs had licked the blood of Naboth, they would lick the blood of Ahab. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And that was utterly fulfilled. Do you remember David found this to be true, and it was applicable to his own life? He committed the terrible sins of adultery and murder. And God forgave him for his sin, yet the chickens came to roost with him. He reaped what he'd sown. His own daughter was raped, and his son was slain. Even Paul the Apostle felt the weight of this law. He had given his consent to the stoning of Stephen. Later, Paul was taken outside the city of Lystra and stoned and left for dead. Jacob is the classic illustration of this. He sowed some bad seeds of manipulation and took things that weren't him, but he's going to reap what he's sown. And we're going to see that as we find in this chapter. So we'll start out, do verses 1 through 3. Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the rocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in its place. You see right here that always, this is arid country, and the person that had a well did well, because the truth about it is everybody needed to use that well to water their flocks. And it had to be protected, and that's why a certain time during the day the stone was removed from the top of the well, and then everybody watered their sheep, and everybody got the water he needed. The stone was put back to close the well. Now Jacob arrives on the scene before they take the stone away from the well, and believe me, in this instance here, he's just as cocky as he's ever been. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. Yeah, they knew him. But Jacob didn't know him yet. He's getting ready to find out what kind of man Laban really is. But oh my, Jacob is going to get acquainted with him. And in the 6th and 7th verse, and he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He's well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep. And he said, Lo, it's yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And here Jacob has just arrived in the land. Think about this. And he's letting them know how to water their sheep and what they should do. You ever met people like that? It doesn't make any difference if they have any idea what you do, they can do it better. They're going to tell you how to do it. And they said, well, we cannot until all the flocks be gathered together and they roll the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep. Now we're going to find out that Jacob's getting ready to meet Rachel. While he yet spake with him, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. Rachel is a shepherdess who takes care of the sheep. And this was a woman's work in that day. Matter of fact, I want to tell you, I was going to buy some sheep and turn Debbie into a shepherdess, but she didn't go for it. So she thought maybe the sheep we have in this church was enough, I guess. And then 10th verse, and it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And I don't know who told him to water the flock of Laban, but he did it, didn't he? Maybe he was trying to impress Rachel. And Jacob's not following anyone's law but his, because he wasn't how many people figured this out yet? He's not a rule follower. He likes to make the rules as he goes. And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. That's a puzzling verse to me. He just met Rachel. And so basically, in today's age, if I just had walked up to Debbie the first time I met her and kissed her, I'd probably got slapped. But it always seemed strange to me, but kissing that girl and then weeping is hard for me to understand. But this boy had been a lonely trip when he left home. Remember that he went from Bethel. He had to go up by the Sea of Galilee, then get up into Syria. He had to cross the desert. And I suppose he had many experiences along the way. When he arrived, he was cocky and greeted the man there as a matter-of-fact way, as if he'd known them all their life, told them how to take care of their flocks. And he asked him questions, and probably in an officious way, he takes the stone from the mouth of the well. And I suppose when he greeted this girl who was a member of his mother's family, he welled up with emotion and wept. But I'm not making that statement as a fact, because I have no idea why the guy kissed Rachel and then wept. I have no idea. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. Now you'll notice that he calls himself her father's brother. The Hebrew does not make a distinction in that today. Really, if you were a relative, you'd call most all your relatives brother in that day, and that's the way it was. We got it reduced down to whether a person is a kissing cousin or not, but he, at that time, did kiss her, but in English we should say that Jacob was her father's nephew, and he was the son of Rebekah, her father's sister. But I do want to remind you in the midst of this, the way people dealt with things in the East, in the Middle East and all that, they said things completely different. Even Jesus, when he taught, when he came on the scene, he came and he spoke in Hebrew and Aramaic, and he spoke a very picturesque language. We know that from the things that he taught. When Jesus said to be better off that if your right eye offend thee, pluck it out, he wasn't literally talking about plucking your eye out. When he said if your right hand offend thee, cut it off, he wasn't literally talking about that. As I've told the church, I don't want to have any altar calls with eyeballs and hands and arms left up here. Let's just take them back with you. But the Hebrew language is a very picturesque language, made to illustrate things in word pictures. And it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And I imagine that Jacob had quite a bit to talk about. I wouldn't be surprised if he entertained them at dinner with his story, how he tricked his brother to get his birthright. And he was pretty cocky. And how he used trickery to get the blessing and how clever he was. He probably told that night about Bethel too. He told Laban all those things. And Laban said to him, surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him in the space of a month. Now there was more involved in that. You know, when you say you're bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, you're really saying, man, you're a relative, but we're a lot alike. And they were a lot alike, because Laban was a manipulator, and so was Jacob. Now, a month goes by, and here's what happens. Jacob's not working. He's a nephew from a far country, and he's come over to visit the uncle. And I suppose he felt like he ought to have free room and board there. But during that time, he's courting this girl, Rachel. At least he certainly has been casting his eyes in that direction. I think she's casting her eyes in his direction. And I can imagine that one morning at breakfast when this incident took place. And Laban said unto Jacob, because thou art my brother. Was he really a brother? Well, we discussed that. He wasn't Laban's brother, was he? But that's the term they used. That was an affectionate term. We use it in the church all the time now, don't we? Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? Now, this Uncle Laban is pretty clever. Who said anything about going to work? Jacob hadn't said anything about going to work. So Uncle Laban's very tactful, and he says he doesn't want Jacob to work for him for nothing. He says that he'll pay Jacob. You don't have to live with a Laban a month without making some sort of arrangement to get to pay your board. So Uncle Laban's pretty clever. And Laban had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. And here we're introduced to the other daughter, Leah. And Uncle Laban had been watching this boy, and he'd noted that his nephew had become very interested in his daughter Rachel, the younger of the two. The next verse tells why. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. Now, you might think that's a good term, but tender-eyed meant in that day, well, Leah's kind of plain. But Rachel is a fox, man. And that's what he's saying here, well-favored. Rachel was a very beautiful girl. Leah was tender-eyed, was a way of saying that she's not beautiful at all. But Leah was not cow-eyed, she was tender-eyed, which meant that she was sort of an ugly duckling. And, I don't know how you do that as a parent. If you're a parent, you don't say, well, this child is good looking and this one is uglier than a mud fence. But the reality of it is, you can have two kids and they can be different as day and night, can't they? And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. Now listen, we find Jacob was quite moon-eyed. In other words, he was quite taken by Rachel. So he tells Rachel's dad, Laban, says, you know what? I'll work for you for 7 years to be able to marry Rachel. And Laban knew this boy was in love with the girl. And so I don't think he was at all surprised at Jacob's answer. Jacob was willing to work 7 years for Rachel. But this Laban, he's driving a hard bargain. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. So Laban is accepting that bargain. Yeah, 7 years of labor to marry the daughter? Yeah. The only appearance of anything beautiful or fine, noble is the love of Rachel. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. And they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had to her. I think that's one of the greatest statements. Man, he was quite taken. And he served 7 years, and it just seemed like, last year when Debbie and I had 38 years of marriage, I don't remember who asked me. Somebody said, well, what was it like being married 38 years? And I said, for me, went by just like that. For her, I think it kind of drug on, you know what I'm saying? But you can just see this man working. I tell you, Uncle Laban had him working hard. He worked out in the cold and in the rain and all types of weather. And do what? Yeah. And he was desperately in love with her. And Jacob said unto Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. Now, I know people will pass this by, but don't pass it by. I've told people for years, if you're with a man that wants to shack up with you and have sex with you and all that stuff and doesn't want to marry you, he's dishonoring you. And he's not a man that you should be with. And I've told young men this, and they don't like to hear it, but you're dishonoring her. Don't do that to her. But what did he say? Man, working all this time, it's worth it because she's so beautiful. And and then Jacob says to Laban, now listen, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. What's he talking about? Hey, I want to make love to this beautiful girl, and I can't do that unless we do this thing right. Would that blow your ever-loving mind in this day and age? And so we're going to find out that Jacob the deceiver is really getting deceived. Now notice what Uncle Laban's doing. In Genesis 29:23 through 26, and it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went unto her. Now, I have no understanding of why he's in love with Rachel, but he's getting ready to have sex with Leah. I don't understand that. I know there are women in this room who say, well, he's a guy. But it has to be deeper than that. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah, his maid, for a handmaid. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is that thou hast done unto me? How did he make love to a woman that he doesn't even... How did he do that? No. That's what I'm understanding. How did you make love to somebody? Must have been a veil, because it said, what is this thou hast done to me? Did I not serve with thee for Rachel? Where then hast thou beguiled me? Not only that, what kind of a father does things like that? And Laban said, it must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Oh, now he's saying, listen, the tradition is the elder would be married off first, and man, I can't do the younger. Well, then what did he do before then? He just lied to him, didn't he? Because he had Jacob convinced that if he'd work for him 7 years, he'd get Rachel, not Leah. Well, what's the problem here? Poor Leah, yeah. So here's the deal. We find Jacob the deceiver is being deceived by a master deceiver. Why? Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Poor Jacob didn't see the girl he was getting into the next morning. And lo, it wasn't Rachel, it was Leah. And at the moment he saw he'd been tricked. Look at what Jacob had done. Jacob earlier had pretended that he was the elder instead of the younger when he deceived his father, remember? He deceived his father, and that was the reason he had to leave home. See, God doesn't approve of that kind of conduct, I'm telling you right now. And now the chickens are coming home to roost, and Jacob pretended to be elder when he was the younger. Now he thinks he's getting the younger, and he gets the elder. The tables are turned. Become an awful thing for Jacob. To Jacob, it's a criminal act that Laban did, but notice how Uncle Laban passes it off. He's an expert at this type of thing. He tells Jacob, well, there's a little matter in the contract, a clause in the fine print that he had forgotten to mention to Jacob. It was the custom for their country, the elder daughter must marry first. And Uncle Laban's willing to be very generous in his dealings, so he has an offer to make. He says, fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service, for thou shalt serve with me yet another 7 years. Oh my God. Do what? I can't hear you, baby. But the first one was 7 years. I don't think there's significance in the time. The word 7 has a lot of significance in the Bible, and because it signifies a completion. But the reality of this is that he chose 7 years the first time, so he said, you're going to do another 7 years. And why? Well, because he wants that labor. Uncle Laban's getting his money's worth, isn't he? And poor Jacob's is really going to school. He's learning what it is to be deceived. But he's taking 2 wives, which he shouldn't have done. He'll be in trouble before it's over. And so in the 28th verse, it said, and Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife. But now what's he got? Another 7 years, you know. Uncle Laban made Jacob serve twice as long as he originally agreed to. 7 years was long enough, but believe me, 14 years is a long time. And I don't know how, I know he had to be loving Rachel, because I'm wondering if there was any time about halfway through the next 7 years that he looked at both of them and said, what the heck? This is not worth it. I don't know. But God disapproved of Jacob's having more than one wife. And don't ever, when you look in the Bible is a historic book. Sometimes people read that and then they'll say, well, evidently God wanted that. Don't think that. Just because there's a historic record of it doesn't mean that God approved of it. I had a guy tell me one time, who was part of a denomination that leaned towards having more than one wife, said a lot of people in the Bible had more than one wife. Well, not trying to be sarcastic, I said a lot of people killed other people in the Bible. A lot of people raped people in the Bible. A lot of people stole things from people in the Bible. Are any of those things recorded things that God put his approval on? No. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, I've even joked with people and said, man, it's everything I can do to deal with Debbie. I don't know what I'd do with another. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. Now I don't know why my parents chose the name Robert. The word Robert means full of fame. And my last name, Kaps, means cloak maker. So I should have been a very famous cloak maker, but that didn't work out for me. So Leah is a sad person because she knows her husband loves Rachel rather than her. Can you imagine that? When she becomes the mother of Reuben, it brings joy to her, and she feels that Jacob will love her now. Reuben is Jacob's firstborn, but he's not the one who will begin the leading to Christ. It'll be Leah's fourth son, Judah. Judah was the one of the kingly line. David was in his line, and later on the Lord Jesus himself, according to the flesh, came from the line of Judah. Reuben lost his position as the firstborn because of his sin. Levi was of the priestly tribe. Leah was the mother of some of the outstanding sons of Jacob. And so it's an interesting story. We're going to go ahead and get into the 30th chapter. I've got plenty of time. We're going to talk about the birth of Jacob's sons. And remember this, when you get the names of Jacob's sons, Jacob who becomes Israel, and they make up the 12 tribes of Israel. And I've read, I think, 2 different studies where those tribes move over time. And one day in the midst of the second one, the Lord spoke to me and said, why do you care? Can I tell you, we can study things that have no significance on how to live in this life. Yeah, the one we went to that time, preach on the ark, spent a whole week preaching to us about how they made the pitch that sealed the ark. And Debbie and I are looking at each other. Who cares? It floated. Isn't that really the key to it? In the first verse of the 30th chapter, and when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, give me children, or else I'll die. Now, I don't know how she knew that Jacob was, how would she know? Give me children, or I shall die. And so then you find that Jacob goes with her to a fertility clinic. Oh, no, that's not true. You see, a woman that day was disgraced. She was disgraced unless she had an offspring. Can I tell you something that's not as unusual as I think? I remember when I was growing up, if women didn't get married and have children, they'd have people, oh, don't you have other women say, don't you have any kids yet? And if you're a woman that didn't feel like you were to have children, man, you were kind of looked down on. Women are supposed to get married and have children. Man, things have changed, haven't they? Do you know why men believe that women should marry and have children? Do you know why? Well, because men can't have kids. That's simple enough. You should have been able to figure that one out. And Jacob, all right, serious. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? And she said, Behold, my maid Bilhah, go into her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. Now listen, haven't we already been through this? Did you know I have dealt with some pastors who their pastors cheated on their wives and mishandled church funds and all that kind of stuff. And then a person out of that church went and started a church. You know what he did? Cheated on his wife, mishandled church. I'm going to tell you something, man. We have an effect in this world. Amen? And so we're going to find the sins of the parents have passed down and passed down. Did you know you can break that? You can break those things that are passed down through generations. You don't have to do what they did. And Jacob's anger was kindled again, and he said, and she reacted to that. We find here that Jacob and Rachel reverting to the practice of that day. Remember that Abraham and Sarah had done the same thing. God did not approve of it then, and he's not going to approve of it now. The Bible gives us an accurate record, but it doesn't mean that God had approval of everything that was done. And some of these guys, they don't have to worry about that. If Debbie hadn't been able to bear children, I doubt very seriously if she said, hey, I found somebody else can do it for me. I don't think she'd have done that. And this same type of sin was also in the family of Isaac. Now it's in Jacob's family already. He's in a great deal more trouble. The next verses of this chapter tell of the birth of two sons of Jacob by Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, two sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid. Then the birth of two more sons by Leah. So let's get in the 22nd verse. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her, and opened her womb. And she conceived, and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. This is the boy who'll go down into the land of Egypt. We'll follow him in this book. He's really a remarkable person. Later on, Benjamin will be born to Rachel. We'll conclude by listing the 12 sons of Jacob because they're important. The 12 tribes of Israel will come from them, and finally the nation of Israel. So now we're going to find out that Jacob prepares to leave Laban. Jacob had to be incredibly aggravated about this whole situation. He was supposed to work 7 years to get the hand of Rachel. And so here Laban, we discussed it already, but Laban deceives him, and he brings Leah into the deal. Then he says, well, it's traditional that the oldest. Well, don't make a difference. He made the deal for Rachel, not for Leah. I heard what you said earlier, babe, and said, poor Leah. And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go into my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I served thee, and let me go. For thou knowest my service which I have done thee. In other words, I have fulfilled what I said. I've been a good servant here. I've done what you wanted me to do. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, or wait around. For I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. There is a great spiritual principle. We're going to see that in Joseph too, aren't we? But what are we seeing here? Can I tell you this? That when an employer has somebody that loves God in their employee, God will bless that employer for the employee's sake. Amen? How many people know God's the same yesterday, today, and forever? So you may recall that Abimelech, king of Gerar, found that he was blessed when Isaac was in his midst. Now Uncle Laban has discovered that God's with Jacob and has blessed him for Jacob's sake. So Uncle Laban says, my boy, don't rush off, don't leave me. I've been blessed, and I want to raise your wages. And he said, appoint me thy wages, and I'll give it. That's what he's saying. Tell me what you want. I don't want to lose a good employee like you. And Jacob knows by now that any time Uncle Laban makes a deal, he's the one that's going to come out the winner. So Jacob's learned his lesson. And he wants to leave. And he said unto him, Thou knowest how I served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. Now it was little which thou hast before I came, and now it's increased into a multitude. He's coming into agreement with the fact that he's been there, and Laban's been blessed. And the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming. And now when shall I provide for my own house also? Jacob's complaining. He's singing the blues. He's saying, all I've got for this service for you is 2 wives and their 2 maids and a house full of boys. In fact, he has 11 boys at this point. What in the world is he going to do? And how's he going to feed them? He's saying, God's blessed you and he's prospered you, and I don't have anything. They didn't spend as much time. You know, well, I don't know about that because they're not mentioned, like you said. But there are many times in the Bible, babe, you're right, when they don't mention the girl and they do mention the boy. But every man understands we're the most important creature on the planet. We know that. No. And of course, we wouldn't be here without him. That's what Ruth Ann said. And for those people watching on the deal, obviously all I have in here tonight, other than Matt, are women. So I should watch what I say. And in 31:32, and he said, What shall I give thee? And Jacob said, Thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. In other words, this is what you're going to pay me. This is how I get paid. In other words, the pure breeds will be Laban's, but the off breeds, those that are not blue ribbon cattle, will be Jacob's. And Jacob said, You just let me have these, and that'll be my wages. Sounds like a pretty good proposition for Laban. Can I tell you, God's the only being in the universe that can take that which other people don't find great value and bring great value to you by it. Amen? And Laban said, Behold, it might be according to thy word. And he removed that day the he-goats that were ring-streaked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hand of his sons. They'd not be able to breed with the others. They're separating the less animals from the pure breed. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob. And Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. And Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and pitted white stakes in them. And he made the white appear that was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had pilled before the flocks in the gutters and the watering troughs when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle ring-streaked, speckled, and spotted. There have been a lot of explanations about this. Those who say there's nothing in the world but pure superstition. Others say it's old wives' tale. Well, let me tell you right now, it's a Bible record, and I believe it. You know, people are involved in animal husbandry and stuff, say there's no way that would have any effect on it. Hey, they're the same type of people say there's no way a virgin can have a birth. No way that God could have spoken this creation into being. But he did it. And of course, there's genetic factors involved, but I don't feel we should rule out this as being superstition. We believe it because the Bible says so. And this is an important part of the story. Maybe you're too smart to believe it, but these boys believed it. Regardless of whether or not there's value in it, Jacob is using trickery. He'd been quite a trickster, but he's met an uncle who's a better trickster than he is. And now Jacob is trying to make a comeback. And that's all we'll say about it right now. But here's a list of Jacob's 12 sons who will eventually comprise the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. And they will end this for tonight. Born to Leah was Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dinah, daughter born to Bilhah, Rachel's maid, Dan, Naphtali, born to Zilpah, Leah's maid, Gad, Asher, born to Rachel, Joseph, Benjamin. And believe me, Jacob had his hands full with these 12 boys. I can't even imagine the 12 boys. Also, we find there was a girl, and her name was Dinah. And so we'll see in the next chapter that God's called Jacob to leave Haran and return to the land which he promised to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And I'm sure God is thinking of Jacob's children. He doesn't want them to grow up in the environment of Laban's household. There's another great principle here. You know, they tried to find wives that would be the right kind of wives from them. They married right. They didn't want their children growing up in places that are full of idolatry. And do what? No, no, they wouldn't be. And the weird thing about it is, one of the great lessons here is that you tend to become like the people you hang around with. Did you know there are some times when you hear some parents say, you know what, I let my kids, I try to control who they're, but there's some real troublemaker kids down there, and now my kids been playing with them, and they come back, they smart off to me and everything else. And I say, well, yeah, you tend to become like the people you hang around with. Did you know one of the things that we say in recovery, alcohol and drug recovery, is you got to change your playgrounds and your playmates to get better. All right, we're going to end this with prayer. Was that interesting tonight? I hope so. And we're going to end it with prayer, and then we'll shut this thing off. I'll have Matt come and shut this thing off. Heavenly Father, we thank you and we praise you. We certainly have learned that the scripture that says, whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap, is held all the way through the Bible. And here we had this wonderful story about Jacob, who was a trickster, a supplanter, a manipulator, and man, he met his match, Lord, when it came to Laban. And Laban took advantage of him. But Father, that doesn't change the fact that you had called Jacob to be the one that would be the leader. And Father, I thank you that you don't just come along and hope that people can earn their way into a right position, but Lord God, you decide some things ahead of time. And Lord, in my own case, I never decided to be a pastor. That just happened. And it happened because that was your calling upon my life. I thank you, Lord, that we'll tend to become like the people we hang around with. So we raise our kids where they can be blessing to everybody, but not be influenced by everybody. We love you and we praise you for the lessons we learn in these chapters. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. So while you're coming down here, do I just stand here, sit here, and look, Sally? Do I advertise that I went to the Harley Davidson shop to get my new Harley? No, those rods and stuff were like reeds. They were reeds. They're made of reeds. Well, yeah, but it was part of the deception. Was the whole key to it, because they believed that the fact that they were doing it and watering and feeding them and stuff by where the rods were and everything else is what caused the speckles and everything else. That's the reason I said, you know what? There's no scientific evidence, but we believe it. Why? Because the Bible says so.